Good morning, everybody. It is Cowboy. We got Ben Kelleran on with us. Kelleran's Corner. Ben is I don't want to blow too much smoke here, but Ben is a badass when it comes to energy markets and quite a few other things. And Ben, you also have a pretty solid beat on what's happening geopolitically. And if you want to find Ben's work, go into the description. I've got I believe your X profile and your Substack listed in there in the links. Also, go in there if you want a free trading algo built by yours truly. It is a simple algo. Now, if you happen to know what you're doing, you can optimize that and possibly trade it. It's more there to show you how I build those things, courtesy of Algo Factory, our paid sponsor. Ben, how you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty good. Been lots of interesting things going on in the world lately, but it's we live in interesting times. So
Yeah, well, where do you want to start?
I figure we could start with some European politics. That's been something that I follow kind of in the background, but I don't know if
Oh,
you've
I
seen
love
this.
jokes, dude.
I don't know if you've seen this, but the in Germany there have been 6 recorded deaths among politicians in the run up to local elections for people that are all members of AFD. And
Wow, that's
I think
interesting.
it's probably not a coincidence, but I mean, you kind of look at some of these things and I wonder where it all heads. You see lots of unrest across Europe, in the UK especially. But I just look at Europe as the European Union as a basket case. And I think there's a lot of things that are going to change. And it looks like we might be seeing that sooner rather than later. So we'll kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, here's the article, and this is what I was going to say. Statistically, almost impossible. 4 AFD candidates have died suddenly and unexpectedly before key state election. You said 6, so there might be more. And for those of you who might be kind of unfamiliar with politics in Germany, AFD, I even forget what it stands for. I'm sure it's not in English. Oh, Alternative for Germany. There it is right there. And this is what they will call far right, what anybody with like half a brain calls normal people. So like if you're normal, they just call you far right. Like if you believe in, let's just say true equality of opportunity, if you believe in the rule of law, if you believe in control of your own borders and not letting in like the third world, if you believe in a government that's not too extensive in their reach. It's like a normal person, but they call that far right. And yeah, statistically impossible. It's very, very, very unlikely that this happened. And I'm with you on the possible horizon for whatever is going to happen sooner than later. And I'm actually seeing it in the bond market. I don't know if you watch the bond market at all.
Yep. It's been interesting to see rates basically all the way across Europe rising, except for Switzerland. But you look at some of these countries and it's just a dumpster fire as far as their economic situation and also the political government spending, fiscal and debt situation too. It's I think it's going to be very interesting to watch, but we'll see if this is like the false alarm or if this is actually the start of a big move. But bond markets are definitely not enjoying what's been going on. So
No, no. And we've talked about. I know Tom Luongo covers that pretty extensively as far as how basically the elimination of LIBOR and we should say the definancialization of LIBOR, the move over to SOFR and all that is there. I don't think there's a coincidence that happened in 2023 and all of a sudden Europe doesn't have the money they used to because they can't just print dollars whenever they feel like it, right?
well, I think the biggest thing to see where this goes is going to be some of the stuff with immigration, some of the stuff with the political side, and that'll, I think, feed into markets. But if you have some of these countries that are dysfunctional, turning into basically third world, right? Invite the third world, become the third world, all that stuff. You're going to see some of these things continue to get worse, and especially with their energy situation and what they've kind of done to choke off economic growth. I mean, at the end of the day, all the economy is energy transformed. And if you cut off your access to cheap, reliable energy, you're probably not going to have a great economy. So that's kind of where things are in Europe at like kind of high level view.
Yeah, no more. Well, let's just say drastically reduced amounts of Russian affordable energy. They did build in Germany some kind of a large. Is it an LNG processing plant or storage plant?
Might be one of the import facilities where they receive those shipments. I
That's what it is.
would have to look and see where it's located, but you have a bunch of things where they just look like they're setting themselves up for a giant shit show, and at the same time they're also trying to get involved in Ukraine and do all these things where I think it just ends very poorly. So
Yep. V the Guerrilla, how you doing, sir?
Hey, good morning, you guys. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
pretty good.
What's
Yeah,
going on?
we're just talking about Europe becoming a basket case. V, you're not familiar with that conversation at all, are you?
No. I know nothing about what's happening in Europe. It's just
No,
just a
nothing?
wonderful utopia.
Yeah. It's we were just talking before about like the unexplained mysterious deaths of several
The AFD members. Yep.
politicians. Yeah.
Well, it's if there's any look, I don't know what to do about the people in Europe. If any one of you guys in Europe think that at this stage of the game that you're going to vote yourself out of this nonsense that you're in, you got another thing coming to you. You are locked and loaded. The rape and the pillaging is about to occur. The question is, do you fight back or do you just bend over and take it? Because you're about to fall off a precipice. You're about to hit 1,000 years of darkness if you don't put a stop to what's coming to you. And look, when you're in the UK, they froze the pensions. They are they're I mean, there was right now a comedy writer was on Zero Hedge. A comedy writer from the UK was just jailed for tweeting things that offended trans people. You don't have free speech. You have nothing. Everything that you've had for your future progeny has been ripped from your hands and given to migrants. It's been given to the barbarian horde. And you think you're going to vote your way out of this? Folks, you can't. There's no voting yourself out of this. And this is what people need to understand. You're way past doom. So you can put up Union Jacks all over the place. You could fly whatever flags you want to fly and sing all the patriotic songs and march and do a lot of marching and holding signs. Yeah. You are in deep, 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 deep shit. What's coming to Europe is going to make the 50 to 100 or 250 million people that have died under totalitarian governments look like a walk in the park. I'm appalled, and I'm telling you right now, man, if people had any sense in Europe, they should be hanging politicians from lampposts at this point. They had any sense. We're past the point of no return, man. We all know who the enemy is. We all know who the enemy is. We see them every day on TV, talking about policy, talking about new laws, talking about foreign entanglements. We see it all. Like, it's not a mystery. And I think people need to get that right now. You're not voting yourself out of this. It's past that point. Go ahead, guys.
Well, they tried to vote themselves out of it in a particular state in Germany, and 4 of the conservative AfD candidates just all died all at the same time. So, I mean, you can't vote yourself out of it if the politicians you want to vote for don't exist anymore.
Yeah, well, that's just coincidence,
I'm
sure there's a new strain of COVID that took them out. That's probably
that's it. I think it was more like Carvid, like his car accidents.
Yeah. I mean, we'll kind of see where it goes, but I'm kind of on the same page where it's like, okay, if you're gonna not allow some of these politicians that I assume are popular enough to probably win at least a couple of those races, if that's going to be your response, they are probably not going to be fans of what comes next. So
the question right now facing Western civilization is, do you have the balls? That is the biggest question facing Western civilization. Do you, sir, have the balls? Do you? And you know how it's interesting how Europe got here. I'm going to say something very unpopular.
You're going to say that Taylor Swift has a great butt.
No, she doesn't.
Although I was going to say something unpopular.
Oh, that's not. Oh, that is unpopular.
Oh, that's untrue. Sorry,
untrue.
That's different. Okay.
What I was going to say is this: the beta males and the childless barren women are the ones, the leftist women that are the ones that got all of Europe into the sad state of condition they are. And the fact of the matter that the French, the French are putting out an edict to the hospitals that we're going to prepare for World War III in 3 months' time. Who are they fighting? The Russians? You're going to fight Warhammer 40,000? Are you crazy? Are you nuts? Right? What are they going to do? Drop gay porn on them? Like,
they're going to go to the front lines of no one because there are no people fighting them, and they're going to hit nobody with their purse.
That's exactly what's going to happen. And honestly, if you want to fix this thing, if the West wants to fix this thing, end women's suffrage tomorrow. Okay? And in 2 to 3 election cycles, you'll have your civilization back. They won't do it. This is the question being postulated. You have 2 things. Eliminate and subjugate the far left nut jobs. Get rid of women's suffrage because look, there's a lot of great women that have amazing minds that vote as well as they should. But there's a huge, overwhelming amount that don't.
Yeah.
And I think you need to get rid of both things. Maybe suspend one for a little bit until things can be taken back. And or prepare for bloodshed. Those are the 2 options.
Yeah.
And both those 2 options are not good. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I was just going to say, I think the thing that's interesting with that is people will talk about equality and rights and all these other things that are basically a privilege of kind of peacetime we've had in most of my lifetime and or at least relative peace, where these wars are not with near peer or peer adversaries. It's what adventure are we going to take on in the Middle East next or whatever it is, right? And so it doesn't actually have the potential for serious consequences for most of the population. But I think when you kind of look at voting patterns and what happens when you have a huge chunk of the population that has the ability to vote, but they are not even the shorthand of, oh, these people aren't net taxpayers. It's like, well, we'll see where all this stuff leads, but it's generally not going to lead to a thriving economy or a thriving society. And you kind of see some of that stuff going on now. And I think that's why you see the government largesse. That's why you see the debt levels where they are. And you kind of back out. And I figure we could talk about precious metals a little bit because that's been something that is been on the radar for me for a while. And you see silver pushing past $40 an ounce. You see gold breaking out to above 3,500 and probably pushing for all-time highs. I wouldn't be surprised if it's ends the year a good chunk higher. And platinum is finally looks like it might be done kind of consolidating after the big run up into, call it I don't know, like last 2 months where it took a breather, but you kind of look at where things are headed. It's like, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for assets that can't be printed. And I think that's the high level view that I have is like, we're living in a time of inflation and debasement and all these things where owning hard assets and companies that produce them is going to be a good place to be. So I think the markets are telling you something with, like we were talking about the European bond yields and some of that stuff earlier. And when you see what's going on with bonds, when you see what's going on with precious metals, that should be telling everyone what is probably coming on the horizon.
Yeah. Precious metals broke out this morning, actually in the last few days. since the futures market open. We covered that in Algo Factory, and we talked about precious metals breaking out in September, and we talked about it happening for the last 2 or 3 months, and we predicted it, and it happened. It's just kind of what we do at Algo Factory. Links in the description. Where else you want to go with it, V? I mean V. Well, either V or Ben, either one.
Yeah, let Ben lead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is if you zoom out, and I actually went back and listened to the podcast I did with Luke Groman again last week, and you kind of look at where Western governments have kind of ended up. You're at this point where you're in between a rock and a hard place, and when in doubt, the option to kick the can is pretty much always what they're going to choose. And so it's going to be, okay, we're going to try and run the economy hot. Inflation's probably going to be an issue sooner rather than later, right? CPI doesn't gauge it accurately. I know anyone who's been shopping for groceries or anything like that recently knows that inflation's not 2%. It's maybe not as bad as it was 2 or 3 years ago at like the peak of that first cycle, but I think we're probably getting set up for another significant wave of inflation. And when oil prices and some of these other things that are important inputs to all this stuff start to rally, I think that's when things really kick off.
Yeah.
Yep. No, the markets tell all, and when you see, it's interesting. If there is a sharp drop in markets, a lot of people seem to think that precious metals will oh no, they'll save you. Well, okay. Precious metals and even cryptocurrency, from what I can see, have been a long-term safety, right? If the market does tank like it did in January, March 2020 from the COVID crash, everything fell. Bitcoin, gold, you name it, it all fell. But the precious metals and Bitcoin recovered in a much stronger way than a lot of other stuff. So a lot of people don't understand how to kind of take a look at the market holistically, take a look at it from a kind of a longer horizon. And Ben, I mean, that's kind of your thing, long horizon, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is if you look at any of these trends over, like, even if you go back decades, but even over like a 3 to 5 year time frame, there's a lot of things that are going to change and a lot of things that are going to drive those changes. And you kind of get into capital cycle and some of these different things that drive markets, and you want to be in places that are underinvested. And one of the things that we can rant a little bit about on the S&P is when you look at different stocks or different indices, the valuations will tell you where money's hiding out, right? And so if Apple's at 35 times earnings and Microsoft's at 35 or 40 times earnings, Nvidia is wherever it's at, right? There's a lot of money jammed into that stock. And that's where, right, I think something that is maybe more cyclical, but trading in like a single digit PE, stuff like that, you're going to find bargains there, where I think that's a better place to be hunting as far as investment ideas. And as far as like the commodity cycle, everyone should go read the Gehring and Rosenzweig Q2 letter that they put out recently, and they'll get into the precious metals, oil, natural gas, all these different things. And you kind of see all these patterns where commodities relative to the S&P, commodities relative to other kind of metrics show you that there's a lot of undervaluation there. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at gold at 5,000, maybe by the end of 26, definitely by the end of 27. And I think that's basically going to act like gravity for a lot of the other commodities that are, I think, extremely undervalued. So we'll kind of see how long it takes. Like you said, there, like everything, correlations go to 1 if you get a flush, but at the same time, the best place to be is in stuff where it's out of favor. It's not popular. You don't want to be buying Palantir at 90 times or 100 times sales just because it's blessed by the government. And I think you kind of look at some of these different things in market and you wonder how long it can go on. But I mean, who knows at this point? I think going to try and do everything it can to make sure asset holders can keep collecting S&P welfare, even if it's not a real return. It's more inflation adjusted. So
Can you, because there are a lot of people in the audience who they're into gold, they like crypto. This audience has historically been more into either alternative assets or safe havens. So when you talk about PE, that's price to earnings ratio, right?
yep.
Can
Yeah,
you
basic.
explain that and like why that matters and like what a single digit PE might, how that might be significant?
Yeah, well, if you have say a business that you think is worth just $100 for our round example, that means you're buying like $10 of earnings. That's a PE of 10, right? And so if you have a company that's growing and consistently growing earnings and revenue, right, that's really cheap. And most investors will assign a premium multiple to something that is growing quickly and has consistent growth. For something that's cyclical, like in the commodity space, those tend to get lower multiples, but eventually there comes a point where something is cheap enough that it's basically, okay, if something is trading at 7 or 8 times earnings and paying a decent dividend, then you're getting a piece of that income back every year. And you're also buying an asset on the cheap where, right, the equivalent is, okay, if I could buy a piece of real estate and like that would be a 10 or 11 or 12% cap rate where you're getting that amount of money back every year. And that's, I mean, most multifamily and residential, all these different REITs and real estate funds tend to be looking at cap rates in, I think it's like 5 or 6% right now. Right. So that's like anywhere from a 15 to 20 times multiple. So it's if you find stuff that has lower multiples, you're generally going to be in a better spot than overpaying for earnings or overpaying for growth or whatever it may be.
So, you know what? You mentioned earlier that video that you did with Luke Gorman. I was pretty impressed with that. And I actually went ahead and posted that in the community and stuff like that. But what would you bring like to this show as a major takeaway from that? I know there were like a lot of them, but what would you say is like a highlight of that show?
Well, I think the biggest thing is over time, you're going to see gold become a more central part of the financial system at the highest level. When you have an asset that doesn't have counterparty risk and you see central banks buying, you see what's going on in China, you see all these different things, you're kind of watching right now what happens as more and more money flows into basically what is the most important monetary commodity out there. And
Correct.
there's some argument of, oh, it's a currency or it's a commodity. And I think if you set that aside, at the end of the day, people are looking for a store value, something that can't get taken like Russian reserves by the U.S. And that was, I think, a giant mistake when we did that a couple of years back. But I think what we're going to see is gold's going to continue to grind higher, and you're going to see that kind of move happen as it becomes a bigger part of the financial system, as it becomes a basically neutral reserve asset where you're going to see, okay, China can buy oil with gold, and maybe it's not something where we're loading up planes and flying gold all over the place, but you can probably develop a ledger system or something that's more efficient than transporting the stuff all over the place and settle it up that way. So I think that's the biggest takeaway is if you want to kind of protect your purchasing power from inflation, from all these things, it's going to be something where physical metals in your possession is probably the lowest risk way to do it. And I mean, there are speculations I think make sense in the stock market, but at the same time, if you're looking for the simplest way, like you don't have business risk owning metals, you don't have jurisdictional risk. You don't have all these other operating risks of owning some of these companies. And I also think you don't really have valuation risk, right? If you go back and look at where silver is traded in the past, where platinum is traded in the past, and all these different metals, I think there's a decent chance we're probably headed for 50 on silver and pretty quickly, like definitely by the end of 2026. But when silver starts to get going, it like really turns into a feeding frenzy. And platinum, I think I have a piece that's halfway done that I'm going to be writing, I think later this week on platinum. And I think that's going to be basically a meme where once that gets going, you're going to see a big time pylon where it gets to, I think, ridiculous levels. But you look at what's happened with actual physical inventory above ground. You look at what's happened with jewelry demand in China and all over the place, right? If platinum is like 2.5 times cheaper than gold, right? It shouldn't be that surprising that people are gonna start buying platinum jewelry over gold at 3,500 an ounce. So I think in this cycle, I think it's basically a lock for 3,000 an ounce. And I think there's a very good chance it's a lot more than that. So it'll take some time. It's not going to play out tomorrow. But I think the biggest thing is that all these things are very undervalued, and you kind of can look at some of these different places and say, hey, like, I don't want to deal with some of these things. I just want to focus on my life or business or work, whatever it is. And saving precious metals versus sitting on cash is a good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you've been talking about platinum for some time, but what's the feeling on palladium? That kind of seems like the silent kind of platinum that people are not talking about.
Yeah, platinum, palladium, they're very valuable. Palladium is much more industrial uses than platinum. Those two metals right then and there are going to also be utilized. I mean, you need it for fusion energy. You need it for a wide variety of different applications and whatnot. So yeah, look, I'm bullish on it long term. Look, I've said it for years. Platinum is a very thinly traded metal. It's extremely thinly traded. You know, there's not a lot out there in the world, and what we do have is from meteor strikes, so it's alien. You know, yeah. So I like it. Gold, man, I'll tell you right now, it's just. Yeah, we're going to be testing 4,000 before probably this year is out. So getting close to the winter, we're going to probably see 38, 37. You know, we're going to be maybe hitting 39 as we're going to test that $4,000 barrier, and barring any unforeseen events, yeah, there's a lot of tremendous upside for gold. Gold is what's going to be utilized by the majority of the multipolar world. They're not falling in for this Bitcoin crypto bullshit, you know? So the majority of the world is going to be, people want real things. The rest of the world, apart from the West, who can't unfuck themselves, right? Which is what the West is, because of all the financial fraud, because of the derivatives, because of all the stupid financialization of everything. The rest of the world wants real weights and measures. They want real commodities. They want real currency, and gold is a central play for that. But, okay.
Yeah, no, I think the thing too that's going to be interesting to watch is when gold really starts to move. That basically, I think, is going to drag a lot of the other commodities up. Where, look, if gold's at 5,000 an ounce, I don't think oil at $70 a barrel is the right price. And I think that's going to start to become obvious. But there are some people that make compelling arguments that as gold becomes a bigger part of the financial system, and I talked about this with Luke Groman, he basically said he expects gold to oil, that ratio, to continue to blow out, where you get 100 ounces or 100 barrels of oil to 1 ounce of gold, and then 150 and then 200, where gold basically outpaces what oil is going to do. But you look at the inflationary pressures, and there's several cross currents with oil that are interesting. I kind of wrote about it recently, where you have the efficiency gains in drilling as the technology gets better. You have the geology over time getting worse, right? By definition, it's an extractive industry, and the resources get worse over time. And you kind of have those two cross currents, and you look at the break evens for shale and the Permian and here in the US. I think it basically eventually geology is going to win, right? And so I think that's where things get really interesting as US production. There's an interesting boost in production. It sounds like I was talking to a guy who's very well tied in with some of the management teams in the US. It sounds like that was from a lot of the shut-in production coming back online, but I think most people are still expecting that if the US is going to be able to grow production, it's going to require higher prices. So we'll see where that leads. But my guess is it's things start to get very interesting for the whole commodities complex in the next 18 months.
Well, I think that's all that's real. If there is, in fact, a European like default in the bond market, if there is any kind of, let me put it to you this way: if the bond market fails pretty much anywhere in the world, I think it was Luke who said that a major crisis was sparked by like Russian debt defaulting, right? Did Luke say that in that podcast? Maybe it was someone else, but
might have been another one.
And Russia's debt at that time, 20 years ago, was like really small. Nowadays, it might be a little bigger, but if the European debt goes down like that, it's everywhere's going down. The whole everything will fall apart. So it's going to be what it is. At that point, if the financial markets fall apart because of the derivatives, and V and I were talking about some other bond market issues earlier this morning too. The only thing that's going to be left is actual products. And the countries that make actual products are right now like China. We make some, it's not like it used to be here. I think, again, back to one of those interviews, I think we make the same amount of cars that we did like 20 or 30 years ago.
Yep.
It's like we haven't increased the amount of vehicles we make, according to that interview. I didn't verify that stat, but it isn't like we're expanding manufacturing. Yeah, okay, there's some little reindustrialization here and there. I'll believe it when I see it. So I do think that the moves that are being made are an attempt to kind of bring us to a position where we won't be hit quite as hard when everything falls apart. And I mean, like the Trump's moves, talking to Russia, this and that and the other. I think that's an attempt to kind of keep it from getting too bad. I don't know how successful that attempt will be. So all that's left though is going to be real production. Unfortunately, the US does, we have a lot of land, we have a lot of energy resources. We're missing certain things. I don't think we have the same amount of strategic metals, rare earths and things like that they do say over in like China, or if we do have them, we haven't tapped into them. If we, we also have to understand that tapping into that stuff does pollute the environment a fair amount. Even all the work done in Texas for getting the hydrocarbons, people were lighting their water on fire, like coming out of the sink. They would turn on the sink and there'd be all this natural gas that was in the water. They could literally light their faucet on fire. I mean, that, all I'm saying is that we need to be very prepared for things going a certain way. And whatever that means to you, that's what that's got to mean. Some people want to do the prepper thing and they want to move, and maybe that's the way to go. Other people are going to consider looking at maybe moving to another country. That may or may not be the way to go. Generally, when you have a major economic collapse, you also get war. That usually happens, like, I don't know, V, how long is it after a major collapse do we see war? Like 5-10 years? Like World War II. V, you're muted, by the way. I want to say we got, I would say
5-10 years. We've seen it with the Great Depression. We've seen World War I, World War II. It's the same pattern, man.
Well, I think to go back to what you're saying about rare earths, I think we have plenty of the actual resources in the ground. It's just the refining capacity, which I think is from my understanding, is even more of an environmental issue than the actual extraction. We basically have, like, China has a near monopoly on the rare earths refining process. So as far as the U.S. actually getting our house in order on that, right? A lot of these things are very important components for weapons, for industrial goods, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can't make without some of these rare earths. And like, the funny thing is, like, in the name, like, they're not actually that rare. It's just really hard to find deposits that are economically something you can extract economically at current prices. So I think that's another sneaky under the radar place to be looking, is some of these rare earths companies. But that's also a minefield. You have to do a lot of deep research before you can get comfortable with the management teams and all these different things. But I think what is going to be interesting to see is how long does it take, and can we actually cut the red tape to build out those supply chains that are going to be required as far as rare earths.
We can never develop a real rare earth strategic metal base here in the United States. It's not possible.
Well, it is possible. It's just,
it's going to be so small and minute. It's not going to make a lick of a difference to the larger industry.
No, here's the thing, though. It is possible. It's just a matter of what corners are we going to cut? What are we actually willing to do to make it happen? Right? It depends on how big a priority is for some of these military and industrial like bigwigs, where it can be done. Is the political will there to make it happen, right? And at the same time, it will take a lot of time. It's not an overnight process. It's at least 5 to 10 years in the making, even if you cut the red tape and get to it tomorrow.
You cut the red tape, you may be looking at 20 years, 30 years. Can't do it. I'm somebody who worked in strategic and rare earths, molybdenum, cobalt, vanadium. Those are the 3 primary ones, but the most primary was cobalt, which right now it's, everybody's going crazy for cobalt. When I was doing it, the U.S. still had a presence with Glencore. The West still had Falconbridge. We've had, a couple of, Falconbridge was a major refiner for a lot of the stuff. And in the last 20 some odd years, the Chinese have come in and they control the whole entire thing from soup to nuts, and they can do it faster and cheaper and more efficient than anybody else. We just can't gear up to that level. And then people talk about, we gotta, we get these supply chains. The supply chain is there's a lot of investment creating the type of supply chain that is needed, from extraction to refining to distribution to transport. All of that requires a very expensive supply chain in order to handle all of it. We don't have that capacity. We just don't. Maybe if we cut all the red tape that's stopping it, and then we build a really good base of people that could actually work in this industry, and then we could also develop the supply chains and all that, maybe in 20 years, we could bring maybe something that's somewhat competitive on the market. But currently, as it's turned now, it's just not. It's not doable. Why is, when you look at it, right? Why is, and here's a perfect example for you, right? Look at the TSMC plant and the Intel plant that they were trying to do in Arizona. Both are just abject failures, man. Why is that? Because the supply chain that you need for every single component, the gallium, the infinium, the hafnium, the rhenium, all these things that are needed to make these next generation processors and chips, and going from 5 nanometers to 3 nanometers and whatnot, that doesn't exist. So every little rare earth, you want to bring gallium in, well, you got to create an entire supply chain for gallium. You got to create an entire supply chain for hafnium and infinium and rhenium, right? You got to bring line by line by line and build up by build up by build up by build up. Can't do it.
Well,
that's the harsh reality of it.
That's the thing, is, like, I think it's I don't think it's an overnight fix. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think a lot of people basically look at some of these situations and they some people in government might overestimate what can be done in a year, but for if we get competent people on it, I think we might underestimate what can be
Well,
done
here's
in
the
5
thing,
years.
bro. Here's the thing, right? I've been saying this forever. When you call an industry in a country, you not only lose the capability of making what that industry did, but you lose the nascent knowledge. You know how many guys exist from the days when I was doing this, right? It's shrunk considerably because the money's not in it anymore. Now you got some new, upshoots that want to, jerk off Wall Street to this. Oh, we're gonna do deep sea mining, yeah, for rare earths off the coast of California. It's gonna happen. And they're just jerking off Wall Street, dude. It's just private equity bullshit. So they can, bring another company up that's not going to really be doing much, right? But the pay and the nascent knowledge of doing this, the type of people that are required to do this, they're gone. They're not here. Like my mentor in this industry he was the top trader. He was the top, trader for strategic metals and rare earths for Glencore. He was Mark Rich's right-hand man. Right? We all know Mark Rich, who, Clinton, pardoned him. And, he wound up in Switzerland. That's a whole other story in and of itself. But, we lose this stuff, man. And it's going to take a serious shift. And we could do this, bro. We seriously could. But it'll take us 15, 20 years. If we're serious, really fucking serious. The question, because when you look at our politics, this is why I said in an earlier broadcast, not an early broadcast, with Cowboy and Algo Factory, I said, we're not, we don't have competent leadership. We're the schizophrenic nut job on the global field, right? And the question becomes who has the political will to really because if you want to compete in this, it requires a serious push, number one. And number two, it requires an incredible, competent leadership with long-term planning. I don't think that exists in this country. Everything. Look at every industry that you have right now. Look at your industry, the oil and petroleum industry, right? These are it's sustained by players that have been there in that industry forever, right? Forever. Imagine if somehow the petroleum and the energy industry went away, right? And you guys were just laying dormant and cold, and you go from a massive powerhouse to like a little nothing, and then everybody in your industry is gone, and everything that existed, that supplied you guys, that provided the infrastructure for you guys, all that's all been decimated and destroyed and taken apart and rebuilt as, I don't know, senior care living homes or something like that, right? How long would it take for you guys to retool and re-energize and rebuild? It will take a very, very long time, right? Now, do we have the political leadership that can scale that amount of time? That's the biggest question. And this is why it's like, dude, our fucking government, the way it is, doesn't work. Maybe we do need an autocratic system. Maybe we need somebody to come in and be serious. Maybe because look, the average American is so civically disconnected, right? To have civil interaction or civil involvement, civic involvement among the citizenry in the country that they live, it's a very difficult thing. That culture has been gone in the United States for a very, very long time. I don't know how you do this. Like we can pass these regulations, but all we need is some fucking nut jobs to come in and win an election. And it's back to, they have it's back to, carbon trading. It's back to the Green New Deal. And there goes that. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, this is the conundrum the West is in. The fucking system doesn't work anymore, man. It just doesn't work.
I think that's the biggest thing on the political system that is going to be interesting to see where it heads. And I've kind of talked about why I expect a Caesar figure. And I think at some point there's going to be some major changes. And I think that when 50 or 60 years ago, when basically everyone's mostly on the same team, you basically had a homogenous high trust society, right? The right and the left aren't that separated on what they want to do. And so it's like, okay, other side won. but we'll get them next time. And in the meantime, they're not going to do a bunch of crazy shit that actually harms the country, even if they have a different view on what's best. And now you have one side that wants to trans kids and import infinity immigrants and basically do all these agendas where it's like, okay, that's great that Ilhan Omar can like raise her net worth by 30 million a year and wants to fight for the people of Somalia while she's a US representative. But is that something you see in a functional society? No, that's just parasites, right?
Yeah.
And the US has a very
and we also have
parasitic
corporate,
system.
we
right
also
now.
have corporate parasites, right? Look at the military incompetent complex, perfect example, right? We have whole industries that survive on government subsidies, right? So this is the larger problem at hand. But go ahead, man. You keep going.
No, I was just gonna say that when you have the kind of parasites that are in DC, parasites on Wall Street, like you've said, private equity vultures, all these different groups, you kind of look at like the US still has like the rough outline of what could be a great country, great economy, all those things, but a lot of the changes that have to get made to make that happen are like it's going to take some time for people to be okay with that politically, and for I think it's going to be a generational shift that drives that. And as far as how long it takes, I don't know, but in the next 5 or 10 years, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by where younger generations want to go, because right or left, right, they're not thrilled with our friends in the Middle East.
No.
They're not thrilled with the direction of things.
You mean our greatest ally?
Our greatest ally, that's conveniently removing the early life section from Wikipedia. Yeah, that one. But the biggest thing that I think is going to change.
Dude, I'm sorry. I had to cut in on that. I have been like, I've been looking at, because I look in a lot of stuff. I'll have a penchant for like history of famous musicians and stuff. And like, you can't get early life info anymore. It's like, wait a minute, where the hell did it go? But I think Wikipedia has been a CIA front or whatever, like the whole time.
Well, I mean, same goes for a lot of these tech companies, right? And it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. And you kind of get into, okay, you've got Google, which, I mean, take your pick of NSA, CIA, whoever's involved there. But even if you go back to like the very beginning of Facebook and you see, oh, InQtel is one of the early venture capital funders and investors. And then the, what's the DARPA operation that shut down the same day Facebook started? Operation LifeLog, which is, if you go back and read into that, it's pretty similar to what Facebook has turned into. But I think the biggest thing that it'll be interesting to see is like, can the U.S. get its house in order? Because if we can, and we get some of the right people in the right seats, I think the natural advantages and the competent people, right? It's not everybody, but I think the people here, there are certain advantages the U.S. has that are not going to go away. And we'll kind of see where that heads. But I think, like I was listening to a friend's podcast, and he basically was like, yeah, I think all we need to do is basically get the competent white men back in charge and see where that takes us. Because
how many of those guys actually exist?
I think there's a lot more than people would believe. But I think when you have the last 20 years of kind of systematically stepping on those guys' opportunities, whether it's through affirmative action in colleges or DEI hiring practices, all this stuff, it's like, okay, there are plenty of guys, like high IQ white guys out there that I think should be given a shot in business or politics or whatever their arena is. and that has been systematically like we talk about, oh, we don't want to discriminate against anybody. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting rabbit hole to go down. But I think where things are going now, I think there's been some major changes in people understanding what's been going on, some of the things that need to be fixed. And just like the rare earth metal stuff, like none of this stuff is going to happen overnight. But
no, it's going to
when
take a massive cultural shift. Now, let me ask you this: if you're a competent white man and you're coming out of college, you're going to get offers. And now a lot of these young guys that are coming out, man, they're looking overseas. Now, what's going to cause you to because one of the things that our biggest industry for a lot of our smart guys is dick pic apps, from Silicon Valley. Now, what's going to make me, hey, you know what? There's a new company that's going to launch a new dick pic app, from Silicon Valley. They're already seeking VC venture capital, and it's going to be the greatest dick pic app in the world. It's going to be amazing. Should I go work for that, or should I go work overseas in an industry where they're going to be paying you handsomely? Like, look at the whole AI bullshit. They're willing to pay guys $30-40 million, AI engineers, right? For the most overvalued bullshit industry you can ever even conceive of. This is where we are. Like, our talent is going to the money, but some of the talent staying here for the quote unquote money is getting involved in companies and things and businesses and industries that they themselves have no real trajectory of growth. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for instance, if you're a top engineer and you go work for, let's just say, let me see here. Let me pick a random, like ExxonMobil. Your success is always going to be capped and or limited based upon ExxonMobil, right?
Well, I think
Now,
what you got. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Now, you're gonna say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna be a top engineer. I'm gonna find a new, innovative way, or let's say whatever the top mining company is, or whatever, right? But then you're coming out, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna start on my own. I'm gonna strike out on my own. The difficulty for you to create a legitimate, real, physical business that actually produces real shit in the United States, it's oh my god, I think you have a better chance of striking the lottery or getting stung to death by killer bees in your own bathtub than that happening. Because the impetus, the incentive is for you to bullshit some sort of wanker crap product or company and have private equity sell the shares on Wall Street and have a whole entire dog and pony show story and narrative built around it, because this is what you see in every sector of the country that we live in. This is the problem. If I'm a young white guy coming out of college now, I've seen so many stories of enterprising young white men, and they're fucking leaving. They're winding up in Panama, Brazil, Colombia. They're striking out in Kazakhstan, in the Eastern Caucasus. They're heading out to like Eastern Europe. They're getting out to Asia. They're winding up in Malaysia and in Singapore and whatnot. And some are going to China. And it's like there's even those that are winding up in Africa, because the prospect to make something real, put their talent to use without any of the overhead and bullshit, the regulatory and governmental bullshit that has fucking eunuched us as a nation, right, or castrated us as a nation. They don't have those problems there, and they're being very successful. This is what is that we have to create that environment where our brain trust doesn't leave. You see what I'm saying? It's like this is where we have to leap off from the axiomatic phrases. Hey, we just need to do this. We just need to do that. Into when you start drilling down into the granularity of the very things that we need to in order to foster this, and that's where we're lacking, and that's where we need to build to prevent that from occurring. A young, enterprising, high IQ white man, there's no reason for him to leave the United States. But over here, it's a very difficult thing to start business. What are your takes on that, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is the thing that I think it'll take some time to sort out. But I think you're seeing a lot of young guys with a very different attitude towards like working for the man, just going to be a cog in the machine. And I think a lot of them, like you said, are choosing over like, hey, I want to get a job in finance, or I want to get a job in at a big company or a big firm, it's like, okay, if that's my option, or it's go overseas or try and start something on my own. I think most people, not most, but a lot of people have basically decided, hey, like the companies and big firms, like they don't care about you. They're not gonna, like, the agreement of put in 30 years or 40 years at some of these companies right out of college, and you'll end up with the gold watch and retirement and all these things. That's a thing of the past, right? And so there's no loyalty and no illusions about what employment will get you. And so I think that change in attitude, and you see it with less men going to college, which is for most degrees a waste of time. Not all, but most. And so I think you're starting to see some of these changes happen, but it's going to take some time to see where that puts us in 5 or 10 years with the groups of kind of young men that are coming out of these systems. And like, okay, if you're going to go into the trades right away, right, you can build a business there without going to college. Or if you're going to build a business selling physical products or whatever it may be, I think there's a lot of things that are going to change, and the general like cultural direction of things over the last couple of years is sort of why I'm optimistic about where that heads. And it's not going to be a straight line. It's not going to be simple or easy, but I think you're going to see people's priorities shift as the generations shift.
I think what you're I think this conversation becomes a lot more simple when you just apply simple economics to it. It's supply and demand. When are the we can say white guys, I mean, let's just say like even American guys, like people who are inherently American, they talk like you, they talk like me, most of them are going to be white, right? Whatever. So when are those guys going to get jobs? When are they going to want to stay here and get jobs? When the jobs are made available. And also, it's going to be when this bullshit falls apart. Putting these massive salaries into AI and all that stuff, that's not going to last. There's no way that lasts. As long as that's there, as long as that is supplied, those jobs will be taken. But over time, that's probably going to go away. Guarantee you, it's all going to even out. It's just a question of how ugly is the process going to be to even out, right? And then, yeah, if it all falls apart here in the States, then it's going to be a question of who takes over when it does. And that's really the big question. If we do have a situation that the AI, DP apps, the fake economy, the Netflix, all those stocks become nothing because they're not really worth that much anyway, and there's an entire flip, I mean, I think the best place to start is training kids to be machine tool makers. And you can do that in 4 months. They're doing it now. Like, there's programs available right now. I have family who does that to understand how to operate a star machine, like a CNC. Those kinds of things can be trained rather quickly. You technically could probably learn it for free on YouTube if you really are a pretty smart person and very resourceful. I don't know that you're ever going to do as well as taking a course, right? But machine tools are where it all starts. Once you have machine tools, you can start building. And then there's going to be, where are we going to get our resources? Where are we going to get our steel? Those are all questions that I don't think are ever going to be answered until like what we have going on right now falls apart, because the supply just won't be there of those kind of jobs. And people are going to leave until that happens. So the question is, are we going to have leadership that is prescient enough to see this coming and at least put the seeds in place for this to happen more quickly? We may have that now. We don't know. I'd like to think we do. My confidence in our leadership is extremely low, but at the same time, I don't know. It's all a big gamble. And because none of us know the future, then yeah, are you better off moving to Russia or China? I don't know. I mean, if the shit goes down, are we going to go to war? Who knows? This is the game we play, right?
Well, that's the thing, is I think the talent base, even if it has been kind of dragged into some of these different things that are not going to be all that productive, I think the talent base is there. It's just a matter of making sure they end up in more productive places. So
you know how to fix this whole thing? I'll tell you how to fix this. It's very unpopular. Very, very unpopular. America needs to go back to a physical economy, right? It needs to go back to real industrial production, real economic activity, and get away from this, fire economy, finance, insurance, real estate, the speculative side. In order for us to actually retool and to actually industrialize, we need help from two countries. I think Matthew Ehret said it best. America is a country on fire. Okay? And Russia and China are the two countries that are the water that could put it out. We need to work with those two countries in fair and equitable partnerships. And we need it. Because there's certain things we just cannot do, number one. And number two, we don't have the qualifications or the talent set to do so. And we can have a synergistic thing where there's things that we can do that others can't do. And we learn from each other. And there's a reason why these globalist scumbag cocksuckers keep these three countries separate. They don't want us working with the Chinese and the Russians. And this is why the left hates the Russians and the right hates China. They've programmed themselves like this, right? And that's the way forward. If America is ever to be great, like think about this, right? Oh man, Trump's gonna come to office. Gas is gonna go to 99 cents a gallon. Blah 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 blah. Drill, baby, drill, baby, drill. You can drill all the fucking oil you want. You can pump all the gas you want. But the problem is, we still have the same refinery capacity as we had in 1973. You know.
That's an interesting. Maybe we can wrap up with this. I have a buddy who's talking about crack spreads, and that's basically what the refiners make off refining a barrel of oil. And it's been basically ramping over the last 6-7 months. And generally, if you're seeing crack spreads rallying like that, you're probably going to see oil follow suit, but we'll kind of see where it goes. But the I guess
there's what you're talking about, right? You're talking about the crack spreads and
yep,
oil falling. So
and
how much of that plays into the speculative side of things? Right?
I don't know. I mean, it's really interesting when you start digging into what goes into the whole oil industry, because most people, even people that have a better than surface level understanding, it's still pretty simple in their minds, where you start digging and you realize like how much there is that you don't know, how complicated it actually is, and what the energy industry and oil in general means for modern day life and the products it ends up in. Yeah. And so I think that's where I kind of go back to, like, that's one place where the US does have a serious advantage, is in energy production, in the technology required to produce energy. And that's, I think, one of the most important, like, foundational building blocks of trying to build out everything else we've kind of been talking about, whether it's more infrastructure for a manufacturing economy, or building real goods, or more skilled labor, people moving from AI and all the stuff that is just vaporware to producing real things. I think the biggest thing will be interesting to see is, can the US use that energy advantage to actually build up some of these systems, or do we basically continue down the path of the hyper financialized economy, right? Yeah. So we'll see where it goes, but there are certain things I'm optimistic on. Our political system and the people in power currently, for the most part, is not one that.
Yeah, we got to get rid of this octogenarian ruling class. This geriatric class of rulers is what you see in end stage empires. We need to get rid of all of them. We need to put in a retirement law. You can't, if you're 60, 60's it. You hit 60, you're gone. That's it. You know, there's no reason, and no more continuous running for office over and over again. You got to put in term limits. That's how you start changing it first. And we need young, vibrant, out the box thinkers, man.
Yeah, I think that would be a big win if we could actually get that, where it's like you have guys that are in their prime, where it's like you've got a decade or two of experience, but you're not on the back end of your life where it's obvious that, right? I think one of the things that happens naturally is as people get to 70, 80, I mean, sometimes 85, 90, even in some of these political jobs, is your risk tolerance is lower, and your time horizon of thinking about the future is like the number of times I've heard from older generations is like the view. It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be here in 5 years or 10 years. So what does it matter? Yeah. Right. I've heard that so many times from older generations. And that's, I think, a big problem with what you see in our politics, where it's like, okay, well, I got mine. I'm going to be out of office in 4 years or 6 years, and I'm going to be dead in 10. Right. It's like, what does it matter anyway? I got mine, right?
Exactly. And that's all they care about. That whole generation, that's all they care about. I got mine. Very well said. Ben, thank you for coming on, man. Great conversation, great time. Folks, again, check out Ben Kelleran. The links are in the description box. And with that being said, Ben, any last words you want to say?
No, I think it was just a good conversation on a bunch of different topics. I think the biggest thing that I'd kind of leave people with is America has certain structural advantages that we will see if we put those to good use over the next 5 or 10 years. And none of these changes are going to happen overnight. But I think people are underestimating how fast some of these things can change. And it's like there are big problems, absolutely. But with where I think the U.S. is relative to even a place like Europe or some of the other places around the world, I think there are certain things that are fixable and are things that can be dealt with. It just requires a group of people that have the political will to make those changes.
Yep, absolutely. Do we have the will? That's the question. Do we have the balls, right?
I think, are we hungry enough?
Are we hungry enough?
Question.
Otherwise, we'll be very hungry.
We've had the fake money economy, and people can basically live in their mom's basement. When people stop eating, that's when they'll get the balls. When the food becomes like either not available or very expensive, that's when people will get balls. And it's not in a good way. People will start killing each other. So hopefully we can avoid that problem.
Yeah.
Great conversation, guys. Lots of challenges ahead, and also lots of hope on the horizon as well. And with that being said, we are over and out. Take it away, Cowboy.